All right, thank you. So today I'll be presenting Synedelica, Mixed Reality Reimagined. This is an artwork and an experience that I developed over a few years with my colleague and friend Noah Miller and my PhD supervisor and friend Bernhard Riecke, together at Simon Fraser University while I was working on my PhD. With Synedelica, we wanted to ask, instead of inserting virtual objects into the physical world, what would happen if we created mixed reality that was rooted entirely in the physical world? And so with that, we created the synesthetic experience that responds to both the sound and the visuals of the world around you. It transforms everything you see by modulating the shadows with the low frequencies, highlights with the high frequencies. And we took this on many different explorations around the world that I'll be sharing with you today. So Synedelica, the name, is very self-descriptive. It's a synesthetic, cyberdelic experience, and that is to say that it mixes the senses to alter perception. Now, usually when we talk about mixed reality, we probably think of Milgram and Kishino's famous mixed reality spectrum. So on one end, we've got the real environment, the other end, we've got the virtual environment, and in between, we have everything from augmented reality to what they called augmented virtuality, but we call virtual reality typically. With augmented reality, we're inserting virtual objects into physical reality. Augmented virtuality, we're inserting physical objects like our hands, controllers, bodies into a virtual reality. With Synedelica, we kind of went perpendicular to this. We remediated all of reality, direct mediation of physical reality itself. So every physical object you can see is mediated and appears both as virtual and physical object that you can interact with just like you would every day, but you see it from a new perspective. So the design process of Synedelica really unfolded as a kind of exploration of the technological constraints of the MetaQuest 2 headset. And that led us to this synesthetic reality that we created. I really have to say that without the constraints, we wouldn't have created this. We probably would have worked with the lovely pass-through, full color pass-through that we have today. But thanks to the black and white visuals, we had to do something about that. So Synedelica had its origins in a performance that you can actually see this Thursday, 1 o'clock in spatial storytelling, called Thresholds. I encourage you to come check that out. We wanted to move with Thresholds. We wanted to encourage people to perform on a stage in front of an audience. And so in order to do that, we began with 360 video and gave them precise guidance through the visuals in that video. We then moved to motion capture to give them inspirations as to how to move. And then we wanted to end with this pass-through experience that would give them complete freedom and kind of remediate the world around them. And when we first presented Thresholds back in Laval Virtual in 2022, we had a bit of technical difficulties. We were in a tent and it kind of blew out the lighting and we had no tracking. So we had to go outside. And using the pass-through cameras outside, we noticed how incredibly it brought the architecture, the sky, and everything around us to life. And that was really when I realized that this could be its own thing, that it could kind of extend beyond this performance and be taken out into the world. Now, while I was working on the performance itself, we began right as soon as Meta released their API and allowed us to start to mediate the gradient map, or the pass-through using a gradient map. And that was about all we had, that and an outline. So I began to play with it, first with Photoshop and then in Unity itself, and I started to scroll a gradient across another gradient. And I started to notice that what we really had here wasn't just the shading, but it was actually almost kind of a form of spatial data. We could move lines and colors through space, and we could mediate different parts by selectively modulating highlights, shadows, and so on. And here you can see the first prototype of the synesthetic sound mediating my dog Mika's fur and bringing it to life. So Synedelica itself is actually quite simple. Its system architecture takes the integrated microphone, feeds it through 3 different modules that I'll go through now, and uses that to modulate the pass-through cameras. The beat detection module simply looks at whenever we exceed a certain threshold using a moving average, and it generates what we're calling a beat band. That beat band is this effectively one-dimensional object that traverses the gradient. So it goes from one end to the other. And what that means when you apply this to the pass-through visuals is that it actually travels through all of space. We then have an FFT, or a fast Fourier transform, and this mediates or modulates the shadows using low frequencies, highlights using the high frequencies, and so on. We then modulate the outlines using the overall loudness. Sometimes we just leave this element out depending on the look we're going for. Now with the we apply all this to a gradient. That's all we really have access to is 256 shades of gray. And we mediate all of reality using that. So you can see how it transforms the image here. And this is the result. This is how it looks in VR, all of reality. So depending on where you take it, you get all kinds of different aesthetic results. It responds almost entirely to its context. And that was the first time I saw someone do a handstand in VR. So I think that was really when I realized that we had something special. So you can see that you've got all these beat bands that are responding to quite a lot of little clicks and sounds that are happening in the space. And then it draws attention to things like the plants and the architecture of the surroundings. Now, as I mentioned, I didn't really realize what this was until I brought it to Barcelona at ISEA 2022. Following our first experience at Laval Virtual, I had created kind of a different version that could be taken outside of the performance. And at ISEA, we were playing around with this in the lobby. And I mentioned to someone how it had responded at Laval Virtual. And we said, why don't we go for a walk? Let's walk to lunch. And so we stepped outside and we saw this Riecke Anadol piece that we'd been walking by all week. And she couldn't recognize it. It was an entirely new artwork for her. She played with it, and then we continued to walk towards the cafe. And I want to note that this is well before all the viral videos you saw of the Apple Vision Pro. And you're actually seeing reality in a different way. It's not just regular pass-through. So we realized that actually we could do this fairly safely with a bit of guidance. And we continued to explore it into the night, playing Spotify on our phones and dancing with it. Took it to the beach, passed it around and watched a drone show, and then ended up taking it kind of in an impromptu way to Sonar, which happened to be collaborating with ISEA that year. And there I passed it around a crowd of probably 60 to 70 people. I handed it to someone, they handed it to the next person, and it continued to go around in that circle until it came back to me. And it mediates all kinds of other things, from foosball to frisbee. So we continue to explore Synedelica across beaches, forests, bars, cities, their city streets, festivals, and we found that every context responded completely uniquely. Synedelica wasn't really about Synedelica itself so much as the experience of the world around you. Here you can see two of my colleagues and friends at Kitsilano Beach looking at the waves as they crash ashore, and they're seeing every one of those waves mediated by that wave's own sound. So then we wanted to share this, and we took it to a few exhibitions. And the first one we did was an installation at Unframed, again in 2022, where following the experience I had in Barcelona, we wanted to share it in a gallery setting. So we showed it with these projections on the wall, and we had a shadow play area that people could interact with lights. We really wanted to, instead of changing the experience itself and changing the code, we focused on changing the physical surroundings. And something that we found is in addition to that, people really just wanted to play with each other. So there was a lot of interaction and social interaction. We then took it to Otherworld in 2023, which is a regional Burning Man event on Vancouver Island. And there, I worked with a costume designer to create custom costumes, where she played around with the headset and found that sequin and zebra print and LEDs responded quite well. We then took it there and worked with flow artists who performed using hula hooping and other techniques and shared the piece as we roamed the festival. As we moved around, we would maybe go to a music performance or different spaces and share it depending on the context. The flow art performers might perform in front of somebody, or they might collaborate with them, and lots of different things unfolded. So we had many observations, and I'll just share a few with you today at a very high level. But in all, Synedelica really allows us to reimagine mixed reality to connect with one another and the physical world around us. I think the key thing that we accomplished with Synedelica was that we created something that fully responds to its context. Synedelica, as I mentioned before, is entirely about experiencing the thing that's there in front of you. It's different depending on whether it's, depending on the individual, depending on whether you're doing it at the beach or at a festival or in some other context. It completely changes the experience. It can be relaxing, it can be completely overwhelming. It totally depends on where you experience it. It also really seems to rekindle curiosity. I've had friends and others take Synedelica out into the forest and go for walks, watching as they walk through the forest and their footsteps mediate the world around them. People often look really closely at a leaf or the bark on a tree or start to play with water and splash in it. And what's really interesting about this is that while they're seeing the world through a new perspective in the headset, that kind of playful curiosity seems to last beyond, and the headset comes off, and there's sort of an attunement to what they saw while they were in the headset, and they continue to explore the world through this new perspective. It also really changed the way that I think about social sharing using mixed reality. I've spent the last 10 years working on different ways of facilitating social connection and encouraging self-expression using mixed reality technology. And Synedelica stood out because it got out of the way. Normally, we put on the headset and we use this technology to connect through the headset. But what Synedelica was doing most of the time was allowing for these brief mediated moments that would connect strangers and friends alike. And it would give us something to share and pass on to the next person. We would do this out in the street, and all of a sudden, people would gather and want to try it. And we would pass it around, and then we would start talking about it, and we'd start talking about other things, and continuing. So it created connections that actually lasted beyond the VR headset experience. And I really appreciated how you could take one headset and entertain 5, 10 people, and then continue to be connected in the same space and not have to rely on telepresent experience. So there's no shortage of applications, I think, for this approach. As far as I'm concerned, I think we actually kind of stumbled across an entirely new creative medium when we think about mediating or remediating reality itself rather than inserting objects. We can play around with how everything, the entire world around us looks. It becomes our canvas. One example of how I've been doing this is using it in immersive music videos, modulating the background or the pass-through in order to kind of create an experiential arc throughout the experience. So for example, in Majuba here that I created with Ruby Singh here in Vancouver, we do insert virtual objects, but we also, the background steadily progresses from a black and white to a really high contrast in order to facilitate a certain experience in that. Something that I've seen a lot is that it has the potential to help overcome social anxiety, and something that some colleagues are exploring is the potential for it to modulate psychedelic-assisted therapy, where it could become a tool for reducing dosages and potentially controlling more precisely the experience that people have. All in all, Synedelica proposes an immersive future that deeply connects us with physical reality, and that's the immersive future I'd like to live in. If you want to try Synedelica, come find me. I'll be walking around with it, and a colleague and I will be sharing it the rest of the day. Thank you.